to connect to the different servers you need to. Okay, so that quickly covers the authentication. Now let's take a look at how we're dealing with OIM. Okay, I have an OIM wrapper that I've been using for a long time. I've been enhancing it now for a while, and it's R2 ready. I've been using it in R2 for a little bit now, and it's working out great. So that I've dropped it into the web app here. So Struts has a nice ability to do interceptors. So let's take a look here. So let's look at our interceptor. Let's look at our action class. Okay, and we'll look at our struts XML. There we go. Okay. Found it even though I spelled it wrong. Excellent. Okay, so when we log in, I don't know if it's still, yeah, okay, good. So when we log in here and we select OIM, we see the user data from OIM. If we look in the log here, we can see where, here's the properties, all those properties we saw in the properties file. We have access to all of those in the action class. The OIM interceptor kicks off and authenticates to OIM. The action class runs and starts doing its thing, and then once it's finished doing its thing, the action class ends, and then the interceptor closes the OIM connection. So let's see how you put that together. You have a couple of OIM interceptors. So here's the OIM client interceptor class. So all you have to do is implement these three interfaces, and then when your action class starts up, if your action is an instance of a login, we will call the login method in your action class. If you have implemented the prepare method, we will then call the OIM prepare method in your action class. And if you've implemented the logout method, we will then call the logout method in your action class. And you can opt to have none of these called by setting this flag, which I'm probably going to be removing anyway. So, okay, and so now all you have to do is implement these interfaces here. So let's look at the OIM action class that's actually doing that user data for us. Okay, so when the action class starts up, the first thing that happens is it calls the well, that's actually not the first thing that happens. There is a login method. Here we go. Okay. All right. So then we also have this. Okay. So when Spring starts up, Spring is loading our helper client. So I have a service here called an OIM helper client. Okay, and it does the authentication and makes the connection to the OIM client and has one or two utility methods in it, but it also lets you use the wrapper classes, which we'll see here in a second. So whenever your action class starts up, Spring will inject a new instance of this guy, because the way I have it set up in Spring is to give you a new instance. Just to make, because this stuff isn't thread safe, you need a separate connection for each request. So that's what's going to happen here. The prototype option will give you a new instance of this class, so you won't get a singleton. So when your action class starts up, you'll see here we have our OIM helper client defined, and we have a setter for that helper client, so that right here, so that Spring will inject it for us. So what happens is when our class gets kicked off, Spring will inject our helper client, the interceptor will fire and call your login method, which will then call the login method of your of the helper client.